This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host, Mike Rappin. This week, I am joined by two Krakoan mutants hell-bent on becoming Mr. Sinister's pets, Eric Reznyak.
Hello.
And Kevin Dillon.
Hey there.
Thank you both for joining me on this episode. I'm very excited to have you both back because, you know, as much as I like talking about comic books with people, I really like talking about X-Men comics with people, and you two, I think, are becoming my favorite people to talk about X-Men books with. So before we dig into that, because we are going to be digging deep into the X of Swords event and the post-mortem, everything that comes after that, what we think the future of the X-Men is after X of Swords. Before we get into that, I have to ask the question that I'm legally mandated to ask as part of this show. How have you been, and what comic books have you been reading? How have comic books been for you? Let's start with you, Eric.
I'm #thriving. Yeah, we got through 2020, so that's amazing. We did it. No, I'm good. And the comic books that I have been reading, I took advantage of Comixology's, there's a free plug, end of the year sales for back issues, and I availed myself of the Eternals maxi series from 1986, which is written by Walt Simonson and drawn by Sal Buscema, and with the new Eternals book launching this coming week by the very exciting creative team of Karen Gillan and Asad Rabik. I wanted to get to know that franchise a little bit better since the movie's coming out as well. I'd always been familiar with them from Cersei's long run in the Avengers in the 90s, and I had read the Neil Gaiman relaunch in the early 2000s, but I wanted to kind of dig a little more deeply into this property, and I've actually been loving it. A lot of the 80s stuff can sometimes read very creaky. This is great. It's a 12-issue miniseries. I was like 99 cents an issue on Comixology, and
Steal.
Yes, total steal. And I will say this, that it's always kind of been a C or D list property for Marvel, the Eternals, but so was Guardians of the Galaxy, and they've turned that into really Juggernaut, and there's a lot of meat in the Eternals. I think we all kind of were like, well, if the Inhumans had worked out, we don't think we'd be getting an Eternals movie, and I think there's probably truth to that. Eternals is a meaty subject matter. You're dealing with really big issues of the nature of life. You're dealing with the concepts of what are the responsibilities of the superpowered to the global community. It is a property that has diversity really sewn into it. If you're not familiar with the Eternals, the whole concept is like, by the way, no Marvel property is more directly tied to the Celestials, who have already made appearances in the MCU, if you're the movie fans, than the Eternals. They are ingrained into that, and the whole concept is these Celestials came down to Earth. They created humanity existed. They created the two offshoots, the deviants, which are the genetically unstable bad guys, quote unquote, and then the Eternals, which is a small 100 group of superpowered, like, perfect icons. And then the whole thing is about diversity, which is why, the movie coming out is hyper diverse. That's very much in line with this property. I love this miniseries that I'm reading from the 80s because it really is diving more into the characters of Thena, who's going to be played by Angelina Jolie. She's really complicated, and I love it. I'm getting more to know about Icarus, who I've always kind of thought is the standard Superman type, but he's really kind of flawed and an egomaniac and kind of emotionally stunted. Gilgamesh, Phastos, Kanto, like, it's really a great property, and it has some fantastic antagonists, both with the Deviants as well as within the Inhumans themselves. And if you have not read it, or if you've only read the Gaiman version, I encourage you to go back and read some of the earlier stuff. There's a lot to work with here, and I personally am very excited about the new comic series as well as the film coming out.
Yeah, you've convinced me. I really think I've always had like an interest in the Eternals. I've always thought like that idea was cool, this higher than high kind of concept of things like the Celestials and all that stuff. I guess I didn't know where to start, and I think when I first tried to get in the Eternals, I only started with the Gaiman stuff, and I wasn't a big fan. So if you're saying that this is like a good maxi series to jump onto, I think I'm going to have to grab this for sure.
Yeah, I would say so. The Gaiman stuff is solid, but it's very slow moving. The Gaiman plot, the plotting, the pacing in that miniseries is really deliberate, and this is a lot snappier, as 80s comics tended to be. So,
gotcha.
And the other thing I've been reading, again, thank you Comixology for your sales, is the Mutant Massacre trade paperback, which goes and captures the very first X-Men crossover, so it's relevant to this podcast. This is from the mid-1980s, and it was Uncanny, X-Factor, and New Mutants with bonus tie-ins to Daredevil, Thor, and Power Pack, which introduces the the Marauders, as they are sent by an unseen Mr. Sinister. He's mentioned but never actually shown to massacre the Morlocks in the Morlock tunnels, and it's great. I had only read parts of this, the Uncanny issues, none of the others, and it's really harrowing. And there's actually a lot of plot points that are deliberately reflected in the X of Swords crossover. If you're reading the current Hellions book, a lot of the stuff in those first couple issues where they go back to the asylum where Sinister was making all of his clones of the Marauders, this is directly referencing some of that stuff. The stuff having to do with Betsy, this is the storyline, by the way, where Betsy Braddock is first introduced to the X-Men. The way that she is dismissed by the X-Men themselves and really treated like shit in the storyline is very much echoed in X of Swords, where she is constantly being put down. I'm fascinated by this weird treatment of Psylocke that is consistent to her character, that when she's not a ninja, she is treated as utterly useless by her teammates and friends. So it's a really interesting, some great, it's written by Claremont and Louise Simonson, some great art by Walt Simonson, by Alan Davis. I highly recommend it if you have not read it. Again, the very first X-Men crossover, we wouldn't have X of Swords if we didn't have Mutant Massacre. So it was like $5, worth every penny.
Gotcha.
Eric was sending me messages about like what they were saying to Betsy in the comic, and I was just like, these burns of her are so deep and mean. It's crazy to think about, because the way I've read Psylocke and Betsy and all the variations of her over the years, it's just like, I was like, oh my God, because I've never read it, so I'm curious, and I might have to pick it up myself.
Wolverine and Storm are straight up savage to her in the first couple issues in which she's there. They're just like, you are useless, mind your business, you are not an X-Man, just go over and sit in the corner. And she's like, I'm literally the only telepath you have in this house right now, and you are being attacked by killers, so please use me. It was amazing.
Well, that's again, these are like older books that I feel like I know the names of, and I know that people respect. Like this Eternals run, I know that I've heard of it. Walt Simonson, I mean, anything that he's done has pretty much got like a gold star from a lot of people. And this Mutant Massacre book, I mean, this is just another Claremont classic, right? So I'm surprised that I haven't actually read these, but I've always been the person that's like, yeah, that all happened in the past, who cares? But to hear that this actually relates to like the way that Psylocke's been treated, Betsy Braddock in specific, it's fascinating. I feel like now I need to read this too. Eric, I need to read new comics, not old comics. What the hell are you doing?
No, well, it's funny you mentioned that because Kevin and I are actually working on a side project called Readers of the Lost Arcs, where we're going to be going back and looking at comic runs that inform current runs of comics or cinematic spinoffs. So Kevin and I, through our podcast, The Great Pop Culture Debate, which Mike also works on, it's all very incestuous, folks. I'm sorry. But so are the X-Men. It's fine. We are working on that as a spinoff for our YouTube channel. And if you are interested in some of these older storylines and how they actually do have seeds that kind of come to fruition now and are relevant currently, we are going to be cherry picking some of those for you, and we'll read them and talk about them so you don't have to.
I see. Well, I didn't know that we were going to be doing constant plugs. We're going to have to take a break really quick so I can reprimand Eric. I'm kidding. Anyways, let's, Kevin, I'm curious to know what have you been reading? How have you been?
I've been okay. I'm hoping we have a democracy in 17 days. So I'm hoping democracy is still intact. So barring that, I've been doing really well. I have tried. So this whole year, I've been unemployed. I've been navigating all these different things. So the only things I was actually really, really reading was X-Men books, because I was trying to save money. But I was listening to a podcast, and they were doing their best of comics for 2020. It's Talking Comics. They're a lovely comics podcast. They're really fun guys and gals to listen to. And they brought up a Tom Taylor book that I had not heard of, or just kind of hadn't been thinking about. So the book is 7 Secrets, and it's a Boom book. I'm a huge fan of Boom. I love everything that they do. I think they're my favorite smaller comics publishing house. I think they're really, the stories that they have created and the writers and artists that they've cultivated are really great. So plug for Boom. But 7 Secrets is by Tom Taylor and Danielle I'm not going to say their last name right, Niccuolo. I should be able to say that. It sounds Italian. It is the first, I guess, non-X book that I picked up this year, I think. Yeah, which is weird. It's a weird thing to say and think about, but
right.
The first 5 issues are out. And I like literally devoured them. I sent Eric a message actually, and I was like, Eric, I'm crying because it's like, it was that emotional of an issue. Each issue is like, so the premise is about these, it's almost like a spy organization. We're still kind of understanding the mythology and lore of who they are, but there are keepers and holders, and each one of them, the keeper knows one of the 7 secrets, and the holder has a briefcase with the secret in it, and their job is to protect those 7 secrets and protect the legitimacy of government, basically. And there is the villains in this are the seekers. Seekers. I was like, I need to get the language right in the because I was like, it's so specific. But you get to engage with what is this kind of almost like spy organization, and are they doing the right thing by protecting these secrets? What they essentially do is they take orphaned children and pull them into their organization, and essentially they kind of become like a little bit of a cult. So it's this very dynamic, interesting, because you're like on their side in the beginning, and you have these 2 characters, Eva and Sigurd, and they're protecting this one of their secrets, and it's this hunt for them and trying to kill them. And you are on their side, but as you kind of learn more about the organization that they work for, there's almost like a darkness to it that kind of, I think, that a lot of comics kind of are like, oh, no, this organization is great, and we blindly follow it and love it. And I think what Tom Taylor does in his writing is that he perfectly creates these like dynamic characters and stories that really make you think a little bit more about who we're reading about, what we're talking about. And he really, from issue 1 was like, I'm hooked on what this is. He's great at cliffhangers. There's a lot of cliffhangers. It's almost very, it connected me. It made me think of Saga a little bit, and it's, creating a world, and like, it's not as sci-fi. It's not really sci-fi fantasy, but it really, you get to meet these characters, you get to understand the world. And it's just been, it's been really funny because I think he does a lot of really funny stuff with his work. And I admitted, I cried probably several times reading these books because within 5 issues, I was absolutely connected to the characters. I don't want to spoil much because I think it's one where, when you read an indie book and you kind of go book by book and you really build your own connection to the characters, you get the feel for it on your own. And there are a lot of cliffhangers that do happen at the end of each book. And I love a good cliffhanger. And they're not for the sake of it. They're really intentional and really well done. So I messaged Eric about this immediately. As soon as I read the first issue, I was like, I'm hooked. And then I finished all 5 issues within a day. So I loved it. And it's the first issue, I think, is 99 cents on Comixology.
I actually was just looking. I was just looking at that. I think I picked this up when it first came out, and then I never read it. And I knew it was going to be Tom Taylor, and the art looks beautiful. So I'm sold immediately. So like,
it's stunning.
This looks fantastic.
Absolutely.
I probably should just pick up the rest of the issues.
You should.
Is one of the secrets Colonel Sanders' 11 secret herbs and spices?
Yep,
because that is worth dying for.
And Mario Lopez shows up for 20 minutes.
Spectacular.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And then briefly, I added this. I also read Messiah Complex for the first time, which I'd never read. I don't know how. I think it was at a period where I wasn't reading comics. I think that would be my guess. Mm-hmm. It is a really interesting book. Or I found the completed edition at a Black Friday sale for like $5. So it's like, I'm picking this up. Yeah. So great to have that. It went in stages for me. I think ultimately I do like it. I loved it in the beginning. I thought the middle sagged a little bit. So the premise of Messiah Complex is obviously after House of M, the direction of the X-Men is kind of in shambles. Mutants aren't being created, or they're not being born, and a mutant is born in this. And so the beginning starts literally with an explosion, a bang, and you follow a team of X-Men who are going to this explosion, and you're trying to figure out who kidnapped the child. And it intersects with the Marauders, which Gambit was part of the Marauders at this point, and I always forget that he was part of the Marauders. And you intersect with Cable as a huge piece of this. This is also, there's a storyline that, I'll be honest with you, I really actively don't like with Multiple Man. I am just not a Multiple Man fan. He just doesn't do it for me. I know.
Gasp.
I know. I find him, I'll say this, I find him more annoying than Deadpool. Yeah.
Oh my Lord.
I know.
Right. We have to stop the show so I can kick Kevin off and Eric and I can continue.
Sorry. I just don't get the appeal. I don't get the appeal. It's I know it's a flaw in me, and I'm happy.
No, that's okay. You're fine to have your own opinions on things. It's okay. I just, we think that we're in the right and you're absolutely wrong, but that's okay. Listen, everyone's allowed to be wrong sometimes.
You're entitled to your wrong opinion, Kevin.
I will say that I'm probably wrong on this, especially that bold, controversial statement about he's worse than Deadpool. That's probably not true. That's me being exclamatory, inflammatory, whatever. The other thing that I liked this overall. Like I said, it went in waves, and I think we can talk about this when we get to X of Swords. The thing I didn't like is I felt like each book didn't really connect to an overarching. There was a problem. There was like it's like when you watch a film and you're like, what's going on with the editing? I don't get it. Sure. I don't get the way the story's pieced together, and it didn't have, I guess, the Hickman touch to kind of guide how each individual book should kind of connect. I mean, they do connect, but you also feel like some books were messier than others. And
yeah. Well, it's kind of a question of like the editorial oversight on this. Right. And I know comic book readers, we love and then hate and then love and then hate editorial influence on a book. But like, given the names that are working on this book and the writing styles of the creators, right? Like, I'm looking at the notes that you've got here. It's Brubaker, Mike Carey, Peter David, Craig Kyle, and Chris Yost. Like, those are 4 distinctly different writers. Yeah. And I'm not trying to say that in like X of Swords, we don't have any distinction in the writers, but there's clearly like an editorial push in how things should be constructed and how the narrative should be told. Yep. And I think with Messiah Complex, it was like, hey, we need you to tell this interconnected story, but we don't really know how to connect them directly with your writing styles and the way that you work, or we don't have a unifying factor like data pages to, make it all feel the same.
It is very that. And as someone who actually did intern at the Marvel Comics offices at some point, I would be so happy to do an inside baseball discussion about how editors work. But I'm not going to bore you and your listeners about that now. But I have not today, Satan.
Not today, Satan. Yes, I think my final thoughts on it would be kind of, again, with the disconnect, is like the New Mutants would show up and you'd be like, okay, they really hate them. This is weird. Or are they trying to protect them? And so, like, out of context, it was interesting. It is peak Dick Cyclops, which I loved. And I loved bottom Wolverine. He was kind of subdued. I thought that was great. I was like, this is a different Wolverine. I thought that was really fascinating. I also don't like Professor X, so this book worked for me too, because boy, is he relegated, and I understand why, and that's super interesting. But yeah, it's a really interesting book. It's a really interesting time for the X-Men. And yes, a great writing staff, really interesting art. I think that's the other piece that I did like. I liked each book picking up with its different art style, which was really fascinating. And same thing happens with X of Swords, which again, we'll talk about. But I really overall did like this story. And I like where it leads us to, although and I like what they do with Cable. And Cable's not a character that I'm a huge fan of. Also, but like, I liked what they did with him, and I think it's I miss adult cable. I'll say that. I miss adult cable. This book was like...
Well, you know what? We could get into the complaints about young cable when we talk about X of Swords.
Yes,
How about that?
Yes, and I'm going to hand it over to you because you have some books that I'm sure you want to tell us about.
Yeah, so it's been an interesting couple of weeks. I think we were off for a little bit. We launched episodes in a weird order because I don't know how to launch anything in the right order. But so I hope folks enjoyed the belated holiday episode that we did last week, me and Brian. But I did read some comic books in this big break that we had. I read Chainsaw Man chapters 56 through 97. If you haven't read Chainsaw Man, it's a very short manga series that you can read for free on the Shonen Jump app if you pay the $2 subscription. So it's not really free, but you know how that goes. But the idea is that in a world set where devils live, born from human fears, cause harm to humans who seek to exterminate them. Humans can also make deals with devils. Our main character Denji is a young, depressed man who's attempting to pay back his deceased father's debt to the Yakuza. One thing leads to another. He ends up selling all of his organs and he starts to die because, that's what happens when you sell your organs. And he makes a deal with his little pet friend Devil to basically become his new heart, which gives him these devil powers called he's the Chainsaw Man. And he can make chainsaws explode out of his hands and his head and his legs. And this series was huge, like in ways that I can only describe as like the pacing was quick, but everything felt like there were chapters that were really slow and nice. And I don't know how the creator Tatsuki Fujimoto was able to deliver such an action-packed, over-the-top, violent, stupid fest of insanity, but also have these really nice, sad, like close to the heart type of chapters all in one book. And this isn't like a drawn out series. Like every issue was really packed with a lot of like story and character development, and we got to know two characters in particular, Denji and Power, who are like my favorite people in the entire world. And it's such a chaotic book, and I loved absolutely everything about it. Like the main character Denji, he has this character arc and growth that is very simple. I mean, like the only way I can describe it is the most simple thing in the entire world. He wants to go on a date with another character. That's his whole goal for almost 100 chapters. And as things go on, he learns that he just wants to do another simple thing, or he wants to do this other simple thing, and in order to do it, he has to kill 1,000 demons, or he has to, hunt down this massive super demon. It's insane. And like the art is spectacular. The jokes are really dumb and perfect. If you go into this book just with like a lighthearted mindset, you'll absolutely love it from beginning to end. And it's a wonderful read. The 97 chapters that you can read are only, quote, part 1 of the series. The next part's going to be available on the Manga Plus app. I don't know how that's going to happen, but I was waiting to get caught up on One Piece when I read this, and it's such a satisfying read. You can knock it out in like a couple of weeks like I did. And yeah, it's very, very good. I highly recommend it if you want to get into some dumb, over-the-top, violent manga.
I'd like to know more about these demons that I can make deals with, confidential to them. I am very open to offers. So,
No, and that's, oh man, the things that they do in this book with those types of deals are insane. It's very, very fun.
Come and see about me. That's all I'm saying.
The other thing that I did read was Decorum numbers 1 through 6. This is Jonathan Hickman with Mike Huddleston on art. I fucking can't believe that I slept on the issues for this book. Like, I've been buying them because I was like, it's just another Hickman book. I'm gonna have to read it in an arc. I could have read this month to month, if only because Mike Huddleston's art is unparalleled right now. I think there is not another book in circulation right now that is being actively published that is as beautiful or as visually interesting as this book. And I know that that's like a huge claim, but if you check out this volume, like this first volume of this book, you're going to see 10 different like artists' rendition of the same book, and it's all done by Mike Huddleston. The premise is from Image. There are many assassins in the known universe. This is the story of the most well-mannered one. Manners are a sensitive awareness of the feelings of others. If you have that awareness, you have good manners, no matter what knife you use. That's not really a good sum up of this book, but it's a sci-fi story about assassins that need to do this thing. There's a B plot that happens where the universe is either being destroyed or it's going to be fixed. I don't know. We don't actually really know all of the story yet, but I cannot explain how much Mike Huddleston's art sells this book. Like, who cares what the story is if I get to look at Mike Huddleston's art in this book? Reminds me a lot of the crazy shit that Marco Rudy would do in a lot of his stories, though it does lean a little bit closer to like your standard comic fare, so you do get more classic paneling. But each issue has 3 to 5 different art styles in it, and I can't believe that it's all done by one person. So if you get a chance, read Decorum. Get the first volume whenever it comes out, and issues number 1 through 6 are out. It's probably, like I said, the most beautiful book you can read right now. Period.
Did the exact same thing you did, Mike. I have the first 5 issues that I bought, never read. They're sitting on my iPad, and I need to go back and read them. I've just been waiting. But with your suggestion, I will make sure to make that a priority this week.
Honestly, you will not be disappointed. I think you're probably going to text me and go, "Oh yeah, you were right. You should not have slept on this." It's fucking, like, I sent some screenshots to Nick, who's another regular on the show, and he was like, is this really the same book? And I was like, yes. Yeah, Nick, you're stupid. No, I'm not going to put words in your mouth like that. But yeah, it's just incredible. Yes. But finally, I do want to talk about one big thing. Today is January 3rd, 2021. Chapter 1000 of One Piece is out. We did it, folks. I spent an entire year reading One Piece. I read from chapter 1 all the way to chapter 1000 in literally 367 days, I think. Folks, I'm caught up. I can't believe it. It's been a journey. I've been updating this on the show for the last year, folks. It's happening. It's crazy. It's insane. I read the final, or the 1000th chapter, not the final chapter, the 1000th chapter this morning before we recorded the show. The buildup that they've been doing for the past 40 chapters is finally coming to a crescendo. We didn't finish a giant fight. We just got to the beginning of a giant fight, because that's just how manga is. It's normally, I think in the United States, there'd be a special anniversary 100-page volume of something like they did with DC's chapter 1000 for Detective Comics and stuff. But for One Piece, is just another 22-page chapter, because they got to come out with 1001 next year. It's got to be a thing. Or excuse me, next week. 1 week they got to create another 22-page chapter. So anyways, I'm just very excited to be caught up. I read all of Chainsaw Man, One Piece. Like, anything is possible now. I've read 1,000 chapters of One Piece, so anything is possible now. And I'm going to get that on a t-shirt. Just you wait. So
there you go. Congratulations. That is an accomplishment, good sir.
Thank you.
Anus thing is possible.
So one other thing I will say about that is that we are going to be doing another like manga read along series. So if you're someone that wants to read another like classic manga series, we just finished the voting for this on our Discord. We're going to be reading Hikaru no Go, which is a manga series all about the board game Go. It's like 172 chapters or something like that. So we're going to be figuring out the pacing and how we're going to be reading that. But if you want to get in on that, make sure you jump on the Discord. But enough about, plugging and stuff like that. Let's move on to comic picks. Comic books are coming out on January 6, 2021. What are you both excited for this week? I'm going to kick this back over to Kevin.
So my favorite, or it's a top tier X book for me, is X Factor. I always love reading X Factor books. There's something about the weird teams they put together in these books. And so I'm really excited about this book that's coming out this week. It's issue number 6. And the tagline is "Siren is dead again and again and again." And that poor woman, Siren and her dad, Banshee, have been through it. They have really been through the ringer. And I'm really curious what Leah Williams will do with this. I hope they give Siren some, reclaiming of what makes her a really interesting character, because I do think she has an interesting bent. I've liked her when I've read her. She's not one of my favorites, but I think she can be done well and not done dirty. So I'm really excited. I love Leah Williams. I think she's a great writer. I think issue number 5 of X Factor, I think, was one of the best X books I read last year. The scenes that you got to see of camaraderie and love within the mutant community were just, they emanated, and I loved that. And I love this team. I think this team is bananas. I Eric even was like, I've grown to really like iBoy when we were talking, and I'm like, I do too. Wow, I never thought I would say that. I like iBoy. Wow. I love a reserved Decken. I think that's really interesting. I think it's fun to see him kind of just like be playful rather than just be a giant dick.
And I mean, I don't have a problem with Decken's giant dick, but that's fine.
I don't either. I need him to use it with a man, but he's been flirting with Aurora. Yes, thank you. And I'm like, okay, that's fine, I guess. And I love David Baldion's art. I think it's playful. I think it's fun. I think he's just the right artist for this book. And I think he does such a really good job of kind of working with Leah Williams to create a book that's deep and meaningful, but yet fun and playful. And I'm really excited for X Factor 6.
Yeah, same here. I've grown to love this series more and more as it's gone on. So I'm very excited for this. And like you said, issue 5 was spectacular.
Yep.
It made me.
Kirk, what about you?
Yeah, I just want to say real quick. Issue 5 made me care about the characters from that class of New Mutants, which I never really cared about. I think in the previous one of these we did, I was shitting all over Rockslide and Armor, and you were horrified. And of course that was bad on my part because then poor Rockslide. But
poor Rockslide.
It really did make me resonate with that group. But one thing I've noticed about X Factor is when you look at this cast, this is a cast that's about family and legacy. Yep. Because with the exception of Prodigy and iBoy, they're all either siblings or children of mainstay X-Men. So I'm hoping that Siren will also take her place on this team. I also am hoping that we will get some type of a conclusion to where Siren was left at the end of Peter David's X Factor, because I believe at the end of X Factor, she was one of the members of the team that had been elevated to God level, as had Guido, and like Wolfsbane had given birth to like the wolf god. It was crazy. So I'm hoping for a reset for that character, and I continue to think that Banshee is being weirdly sidelined by this reboot, especially given his importance to Moira McTaggart. So just throwing that out there.
Understandable.
So for me, I'm really interested in DC's Future State launch, which it kicks off this week, and this is a 3-month, I believe, long process. There's been a lot of scuttlebutt about Future State for over a year now in the industry, and there's a lot of rumors as to exactly what happened. I don't know. I'm sure nobody knows the exact story, but it certainly did lead to significant shakeup in DC Comics management, which I think was necessary. What I like about this approach to Future State, which if you're not familiar with it, it is basically for the first 3 months of the year, there's an entire huge line-wide initiative. Some of the books are weekly, some of them are twice a month, some of them are monthly, and it's looking at the characters that we know into the future. And I think there's different points in the future being represented here, because it looks like Wonder Woman is in the far-flung future, whereas Bruce Wayne is in only the slight future. And also introduces the next round of heroes to take up those mantles. So we have a Brazilian Wonder Woman. We have Lucius Fox's son is the new Batman. John Kent takes up the mantle of Superman. So you have the classic characters in their own adventures. I'm very interested in the current Superman's arc. He's imprisoned on some type of a war world. He's wearing nothing but boots, his little underpants, his shield on his chest, and chains. I am sold. I will buy every issue of that. But what I do like about this approach is that you do not need to get all 30-something issues of this. They're not all interconnected. Some of them are, some of them aren't. You can pick and choose which ones you want. And that is very appealing to me. Anyone who listened to the last time I was on knows I love Legion of Superheroes. I could not have less interest in the Future State version of Legion of Superheroes. The art style does nothing for me, and it just not at all of interest. But I am going to pick up the new Wonder Woman books. I'm going to pick up a couple of the Superman ones, and we'll see from there. So I'm really excited. And also, this isn't just a short-term thing. Some of these characters will be in the main stage or the mainstream DCU afterwards. As I mentioned, the Brazilian Wonder Woman, I believe her name is Yara Flor, is going to be staying around for sure, and she's getting her own CW TV show. So this isn't just... I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, how many CW shows do we need? I mean, come on, DC.
I mean, Supergirl is ending. Yeah, Supergirl's ending. But we are getting, Lois and Clark start soon. Batwoman is back with a completely new Batwoman, who I'm sure will be brought into the DCU. I actually think she was introduced in Batgirl. So yeah, they're just going to keep popping them out. Crunch all you want, they'll make more. So that's what I'm interested in.
Very fun. What Danny in our Discord is warning everybody that the Future State books are $7.99 each. So just a word of warning.
Every issue, Danny?
I think it might be. It might be. We'll confirm that in the break.
My understanding is there's a couple anthologies that are $7.99. And then I think there are some that are just regular price. Although at this point, honestly, regular price for a comic book is outrageously expensive. So Danny makes an excellent point. Thank you, Danny.
Yeah, keep an eye out for that.
I was also going to be a little shady and be like, these DC books will be out on January 5th, not 6th.
Yeah, technically.
I ranted about this, and I need to just sidebar this for a second. DC, I'm forgetting about your books because they're not being released on Wednesday. I just am. It's happening. It's just
well, you know what, Kevin? I want to talk to you more about this. We could talk about it in the break. I want to get through my comic picks so we can take a break and then get into the X of Swords stuff because we are running a little long here.
Yes.
So I will say, just to shout out some folks that are on Discord right now, you can join the Discord at ircbpodcast.com/Discord. Cinco, his pick for this week was Hellions, I think number 6 that's coming out this week. 8. Okay, thank you. He didn't give me a number, but that's okay. So Hellions number 8, and Danny picked Death Metal number 7 because he's also excited about Future State, but also wants to read the end of Death Metal.
Absolutely.
Before I get into my comic pick, though, because it is 2021, I'm trying to do something wild. It's a brand new year, so it's a brand new show in some ways. We're going to be trying something every week. We're going to be giving away $20 as a gift card to Comixology or Midtown Comics, whichever you pick, if you share and tag the show on social media. So this year we want to help you read comic books, so share the show, tag us, and we will give you $20 or we'll pick one person to get $20. This week's winner, Sean Arias on Instagram. I want to thank Sean for his support. He's been tagging us and sharing the show on his Instagram story. So thank you so much, Sean. I'm going to be reaching out to you about that $20 gift card. I was going to pick Eternals this week, but I decided I wanted to go a little bit off the beaten path and pick something that was brand new, unaware to me. So I picked The Last Witch. This is from Boom Studios with writer Connor McCreary and art by Vivi Glass. The summary is it's the one time of the year when the witch known as Kalich hunts the children of the village. So Shorshi, a brave and reckless young girl, decides that this is the perfect opportunity to defy her father and discover the secrets of the witch's tower. But when Kalich captures Shorshi and her brother Brahm, their lives are forever changed in ways they never expected. Now Shorshi has to save everyone she loves by discovering the truth about the mysterious mark on her shoulder and embracing her secret magical powers. I don't know what this is, but this sounds really fun and cute, and I'm all for it. The art is gorgeous. The cover to this book looks like what you would expect from a Boom Studios comic, but I'm very excited to just try something new. So I've got this number 1, probably going to end up pulling the whole series because Boom rarely disappoints as far as I'm concerned.
Yep.
So I'm very excited to check this out. I was going to pick an X book, but come on, that's not interesting. Exactly. Everyone knows I'm reading those X books.
And if that witch is looking for work, there are children in the apartment upstairs that are very loud, and I would like to make a referral. So
okay. I'll let her know.
Thank you.
Well, anyways, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about X of Swords, what our top 3 favorite and least favorite things were, our overall thoughts, what we think about the future of the X-Men, and also much more. And in the break, we're going to be talking about some stuff with DC Future State. So if you're not already on the Discord, make sure to jump in so you don't miss this stuff in the future. We'll be back in a second. For our show this week, we are talking about the X of Swords crossover event from Marvel. Features all the X-Men books that you possibly could read. So just a fair warning, full spoilers for X of Swords. If you haven't read X of Swords, you better press pause on this episode, go finish that up, then come back here and listen to the rest of the episode. My apologies to all you MU subscribers out there who haven't gotten all those issues yet. They'll come eventually and you can come back to this episode. But before we get into it, we do have a poll out right now on Patreon. If you're not a patron, you should definitely go do that. $5 a month will get you access to all of our exclusive episodes. Saga of Saga, a brand new series that we have coming that may be around the book Giant Days, as well as a bunch of other stuff that we've recorded in the past. But we have a poll out right now for our next IRCB Movie Club, which is a Patreon exclusive series. You can go vote on the 3 movies that we have that are potentially going to be watched by our group of me, Brian, and Paul. The 3 movies that we are going to be watching potentially are Batman the movie from 1968, Spider-Man from 2002, and Superman from 1976, I want to say. The one from the 70s, the really, really good one. One of those 3 books are going to be, or one of those 3 movies are going to be watched by us. So go vote right now if you haven't already. Anyways, let's talk about X-Men. Let's talk about the X of Swords series. Now, I kind of wanted to break things down here and try to make things a little bit more focused. So we're going to be talking about our top 3 dislikes, then our top 3 likes of the series, and then we're going to have just an overall discussion about things. So I guess to get things started, Kevin, what was one of the things you disliked about X of Swords?
Yeah, that is a really good question. I know... For me, I don't mind the data pages in the X books, but it felt like there were a lot. For some reason in this, the summary of this is who the sword is, and da-da-da, it felt like there were too many maybe, or I don't understand what the explanation of them needs to be in those. It just felt like a little bit too much for me. I'm kind of growing tired of those pages a little bit, to be honest, in all X books. It's just wearing a little bit on me. And it's mainly, and it's not that I don't like to read. It's just like, I think my goal is like in reading comics, I want to see the blended art meeting the words kind of experience.
Sure.
And I think X of Swords, there were just a lot. And I'm really curious what and why they needed to be as many as there were. And that's my thought.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Like the data pages specifically about the swords and the sections of Overworld or Otherworld.
Yep.
I was kind of confused as to what their relevancy was because I expected them to kind of come into play.
Yeah.
I was reading an article recently from Comics XF, to plug a website that just launched, that we know some folks that work over there on, an interview with Jonathan Hickman about all the graphs and all the stuff that he does, which I thought was a really interesting thing. And there was a question about, why are all the data pages kind of showing up in all of the books? Is this something that you pushed on all the writers? And he said, no, this was just like a thing that I did and other writers wanted to do as well, and so they just came up with their data pages and fed it to the marketing or the editorial folks, and they kind of made it so that it fit and looked the same, and then we would just dump them into books. So like to see that happening across that X of Swords thing made me think maybe that's a little bit intentional because they were all related and it seemed like they were kind of preordained specifically to kind of talk about things that were happening in the issue, but like it felt like a lot of fluff to try to confuse you.
Yep.
Like it felt like, oh, this going to be important? You need to pay attention to all this stuff, ultimately for it to kind of fall down and not actually really be important, with like rare exception. I think there were maybe 2 sword pages that were important and one of the like locations in Otherworld that were important, but I totally agree with you. It felt like unless they're going to do a sequel or they're going to do more with the swords in the future, it felt really kind of unimportant overall to the run.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to do supplemental material like that, and certainly this is not the first book that has done that. I think of the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen books, where at the end of each issue, Alan Moore would do these travelogues that would talk about other characters that many times would end up appearing in the story later. These feel like it's kind of like showing off that you can do something just because you can and you think it's cool, as opposed to actually adding to the story. I think that one of the things that this crossover did successfully was bring Saturnine and the Otherworld realm into a level of awareness to the general X fan. If you weren't reading the Excalibur book in the 90s, or the Captain Britain stuff prior to that in the 80s, you had no idea who those characters were prior to X of Swords. So it was successful from that perspective, but the general reader doesn't give a shit about 7 of the 8 provinces of Otherworld, and we shouldn't, because nothing about them is actually relevant to the story, and that's just a waste of precious pages. When you have this many characters and this much expectation, you need to be delivering, and I don't feel that those pages delivered by and large.
And you might confuse Saturnine with Emma Frost because she looks exactly like her.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, we just kind of tackled, Kevin and I had one of the same points. So, Eric, what was one of the pieces that you didn't like about the series? And maybe we'll bounce back and forth to kind of give some negative and positive back and forth. So we're not just digging too deep into a pit here. So go ahead and give us one of your dislikes and we'll jump into a like next.
Sure. I'll go to one of my smaller ones. But for me, the stuff with the sword satellite felt really shoehorned in. And it was, to me, well, we need to launch a new sword book. Nobody cares about this property. It had literally, so if you don't know, there was a sword quote unquote ongoing series back during, I think, Morrison's X-Men run that I think lasted 5 issues, and it was supposed to be an ongoing series. Nobody cares about that property. And so I felt like they were shoehorning into this because it's a sword-based crossover. So here's how we do it. And like when I first read that issue of Cable that brought that in, and of course, Saturnine makes Cable go do this in Cyclops, and apparently it's the thing that will save the day. And I guess it kind of does in the end.
Yeah.
But that whole thing felt like such a weird tangent when we were just kicking off this story about champions getting their swords and fighting each other, and now there's a space satellite with parasites from another dimension that are voracious. It was just such a, like, not even out of left field, it was like out of left field in a completely different baseball park 3 states away. And they're playing
soccer and the story was about baseball. That's pretty much what it was.
I was like, what the fuck? And it did end up playing in, which I'm glad about, but to me the sword stuff felt really, really tacked into this already overstuffed, very complicated storyline. And I bought Sword 1. I enjoyed Sword 1. I will buy Sword 2, but I don't think that was the time or the place to be doing that, in my opinion. Just putting that out there.
I totally agree. I think that the sword stuff definitely felt shoehorned in. I thought that the bits with Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Cable actually being like a family and stuff like that, I thought that was actually really powerful.
Absolutely.
And I will say I love Al Ewing, like everything he does, I will read at this point.
Yep.
But yes, Sword coming in and being like the savior of the day in some ways felt so out of like you said, out of a different ballpark, out of a different sport. Like, didn't seem like it should have actually factored into anything. It should have been the X-Men that saved the day, not some weird alien parasite thing. I don't know. It's strange.
Yeah.
Strange to me.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to something a little bit more lighthearted. I'm gonna start with one of my likes of X of Swords. I actually really liked the dinner party overall thing. Like, I was ready once everyone got their swords, and I was kind of like, holy shit, we built up 10 issues, 12 issues or whatever to get to this point. The dinner party thing actually surprised me because I realized that I loved the tension that was put into that issue of everyone's ready to fight. Like, they're all fucking mad that they have to even be here in the first place. Specifically the X-Men, like Wolverine is literally frothing from the mouth, ready to kill someone. And yet they had to sit there and be polite and like eat dinner because Saturnine says that if you guys fight, then I'll kill you all. Like, because she has this mad control. Like, there was so many factors going into of just like, I'm so much more powerful than you, but you all must play nice children. Like this ego trip that I felt like Saturnine was on, that it made that whole exchange really, really enjoyable for me. Like, to see Storm have to dance and the end of the issue where Wolverine goes and kills Saturnine, and then it turns out it was all a dream. Like, what a nice little like middle finger to everyone who just expected a fight, but at the same time it made for a really enjoyable read. Like, I was expecting a big fight and I was hoping that the actual thing that Wolverine did with killing her was going to play out, but the build up to that was really, really fun to me. I overall liked it.
I loved that scene. I think it was like a 2-issue long dinner party, and I could have read it for 4 issues because it was so good.
Yep.
And one of the things that Kevin and I talked a lot about, and this is, I think, relevant to this topic, one of the great, wonderful things to come out of X of Swords is the characterization on Storm is so strong in this story. For years, Storm has been languishing as a B or C list X-Men character, I think, since she got married after Black Panther. I have found through Hickman's run, she's being elevated back to the place where she should be, which is right there with Cyclops and Jean and Wolverine and Professor Xavier as one of the preeminent characters in the X-Men. And we are getting Storm in this series, and I love it. And she was great in the dinner party sequence with Death, and then subsequently as well. Really, really strong Storm work here.
Yeah, I think her position in the X-Men overall has been elevated back to this mythic status that I think she's deserved to be in for a really long time, and that she was in at one point, but then like the whole like I am a goddess thing kind of just fell into the back burner for a little bit, and now to see her back in this position of power where everyone looks to her to be this deific character, I think is really, really great. And you can see that throughout X of Swords and all of the Dawn of X stuff. I think she's been put back into that position, and it's really, really great. I don't think she's had enough story personally, but I like that she's in this position for whenever someone wants to grab her and put her into a story.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean that's one of my I could talk about the dinner party for forever, but I want to jump off one of my favorite things was the character development of throughout this story. I thought it was fantastic. I think I'm gonna echo the Storm comment. I thought her going to Wakanda was everything. I thought that was so great. I loved her interactions with Shuri. It was so good. And then I loved Wolverine. I don't say that a lot. It's rare. Like I love
interesting.
I don't say that a lot. And I really liked him in this book. I thought it was funny. I thought he was playful, but yet also aggressive in the right way that Wolverine is supposed to be. I loved Cypher. I loved Cypher. I fell in love with that character. I never thought that would happen. He was never a character that really was a top tier favorite for me, but they just made him so sweet and likable and but throughout, I think what I liked we talked about this in part one, I think the thing that kind of fumbled for me a little bit in Messiah Complex was it felt uneven, and sometimes the character choices were weird and you weren't getting the appropriate action from a character. But I think the thing that I loved about X of Swords is you had all these different cooks in the kitchen, all these different writers, and the through line of character and development was just spot on everything I wanted and needed for an overarching story like this. Because it's just about fighting. And I loved that we got to have fun. It was actually fun to see these folks, be strong and powerful and funny and playful and all of that. Even Saturnine is, I think, now I've said this, Eric said this to me, and I agree, is now a top tier villain. I think
absolutely.
This book really did that for her character, and that's great.
And a very different type of villain. I'm sorry, Mike.
Exactly.
Go ahead.
No. I was going to say, could you also say that Jamie Braddock is a little bit of a villain in this?
Sure. And Sinister is kind of a third tier villain in this too. I mean, what happens with Sinister and Hellions is really fucked up. Pardon my French.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that because I've got that as one of my bits. But I totally agree. Character development is fantastic. I actually really liked the overall arc of Apocalypse.
Oh my God,
I think this tragically broken character who's just been trying to do this one thing for a millennia. Come on, how fucking cool is that? I'm all about that kind of story.
Yep.
It is incredible when you go back, and as I mentioned, Mutant Massacre I just recently read, and Apocalypse is just making his initial appearances in the X universe in that story.
Yep.
Everything that has led up to X of Swords is still canon, right? All of this is about creating the strong will survive and the weak will perish. That and then you find out why he's been doing all of that with X of Swords. So everything is working in character, and then to find out it's all ultimately a love story is incredible. It is a twisting of a mythos in a way that doesn't snap its neck. It just shows you a completely different vantage point. And what an incredible send off for this character. And I'm sure he will appear again in the future. But
of course,
since the beginning of X or House of X, Powers of X to now, I look as one chapter, and this is the Apocalypse chapter. Fantastic character work with Apocalypse.
When he showed up as a major player in Excalibur, I was a little confused, but to see it all play out, holy shit! I really have to applaud the bigger storyline that I think Tini Howard was going at, and I felt like I wasn't completely on board for it. Right, I will completely admit I was wrong here in saying that I wasn't a huge fan of what was happening, and now to see it all come to fruition, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So, it's just one of those judging books too early, guys. We shouldn't do that.
I will say this, if I may. I still consider Excalibur to be a mess of a book, although I thought that the first post X of Swords issue was much stronger.
Absolutely.
I stand by all of my criticisms of the first couple issues of Excalibur, but I do I loved the relationship between Richter and Apocalypse in particular that was developed, and I love how he's longing for that mentorship too. Again, I feel it's actually very in character for Richter to have that response, even though if the mystical woo-woo stuff leaves me baffled. Really excellent character work there. So I'm back into Excalibur. I had dropped it and I'm back in.
Yeah, well, let's see. We kind of touched on everyone's one of the top three things, right? I think I'm just looking through the notes here.
Yeah.
Let's bump over to another dislike. Kevin, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I think kind of building up to we talked about the dinner party, but building up to the dinner party, the quote unquote collection of the swords, there was just an unevenness in that of what I cared about, like 2 issues of Wolverine.
Yeah,
I just commented on how much I liked Wolverine, and I did like Wolverine's character development and his growth. But I don't understand why we needed 2 issues of that. And I guess it was to introduce his new kind of pseudo arch nemesis. But still, it just felt like uneven in the way some of them got the swords. Some of those journeys just felt uneven to me. And I wish I wish every book was the book that Storm had.
Agreed.
I wish.
I was just going to say that.
I wish every book was that book. And it wasn't. And that's okay. And not every journey had to be that epic or that emotional, but why not? Like that,
right.
Why not? That is what it should have been. And I felt a little bit in the beginning like that was losing me. Or it was an uneven piece of this long journey. So that would be another thing that I was not a huge fan of.
Yeah. I think some of my big criticisms of this event when it started was, okay, when are we actually going to get to the event?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like this to me felt a lot like Secret Invasion. I don't know if you guys read Secret Invasion back in the day, where it was like 6 issues of build up for like 2 issues of action. And not to say that we needed to have 22 issues of action. I think that would have been overwhelming. But like, I felt like, to Kevin's point, it was uneven. To have those issues all spread out, to get 2 issues of Wolverine for the sake of it. Like, I understand Gary Dugan is writing both of those books, and the story was pretty big, and we need to establish a couple different things that actually played out in the X of Swords finale and stuff. But I feel like you could have done it all in one issue.
Yep.
I genuinely do.
Yep.
And that could have left room for other characters to get a little bit more story rather than banging out like 1 or 2 in a single issue. And it was a little underwhelming. Like, I know that we got a couple of bits with Doug Ramsey. Again, we're going to talk about him in a second, I think. Where this whole thing with him and Magic, which I really liked, of you're never going to be able to fight Doug, don't even try, like, and him kind of trying to be defiant. There was some good comedy in there. I thought that worked, but again, the build up, I totally agree, was a little bit disjointed. To get to the dinner party, which is great, it's weird. This event is all over the place in that regard.
Yep.
I will say, for me, I agree with everything you guys just said. It was very frustrating in the first, before the midway point. I can't think of what the actual midway special episode or issue was, but I was like, we're spending so much time with the sword collection on the X-Men part, when at least 3 or 4 of those swords were already in their possession, right? And I'm like, when do I learn about their Araco counterparts? And the answer was, for most of them, never. And that was very frustrating for me.
Like, or the one issue that we got.
And I'm like, why are you not taking the opportunity to show me, like, if you really want to build actual tension, and you've done a great job building up this to the story arc, right? I've nitpicking, but if you want to make me care about Betsy Braddock versus, I don't even remember who Betsy was up against. Was it against Iska the Unbeatable? Like, I need to really understand some of these opposite characters way more. And I thought that they really blew that. A couple of them, I mean, Solemn took 2 issues to get introduced, and I still feel like I barely know the guy. If to the average reader, are you aware that apparently, like, he has adamantium skin or veins or something?
No.
Something.
You only know that if you read the text pages, I believe. It's not even said in the actual narrative. And like, he has no reason to actually hate Wolverine, right? Like, really missed opportunities from an Arakko point. And given where we are now as a story for the broader X point, those Arakko characters are going to be hugely important. So I think it was a missed opportunity. There was a lot of wasted time going into depth on things that didn't need to be gone into with the X-Men, and missing the opportunity to really properly introduce some of these new antagonists that I'm hoping are going to be a big part of the second act of the overall House of X story. That's in mind.
Yeah. I will say, just to keep moving along here, since we've got to get through all these things. I agree with that as well. But one of the other things that kind of disappointed me was the tarot cards being like a launching point for the story, and then kind of only being relevant in a handful of places. And maybe that's a whole thing, that's like the nature of tarot cards and stuff, but I was kind of hoping for more mysticism and magic and weird shit from Saturnine, like regarding those cards, like maybe pulling more cards as fights happened and, you know, things changed, and maybe seeing a reinterpretation, or maybe even someone just explaining the interpretations as the story went on a little bit more, adding more cards to the play, because there's a lot of people involved, everybody had a card, and they only became relevant in like 2 or 3 places. I just wanted more of that. I thought that was a really cool idea that kind of just disappeared from the story until the very end. I don't know how you guys felt about that, because I could see what Teeny Howard and Hickman and co and everybody working on it was doing, but it just didn't play through, and I was a little bit bummed. Again, big story, got to coordinate a lot of people. I totally get it, but I was hoping for more of that to be like a central focus of the storyline, because they introduced it as like a crucial part of things, especially when everybody got to dinner.
Agree. And if you go back and look, the free comic book day of last year had the Exoswords preview in it, and the cards were introduced in that. That's when they first, and Tarot had text pages, Tarot from the original Hellions, explaining like, oh, I found this, Hanged Man card. What could this refer to? And I read an interview with Hickman where he's like, yeah, some of those changed. Some of the cards changed, some of the people that they're about changed between when we did that very early preview and now.
Right.
And if you look at the early X of Swords art, there's a bunch of people on there wielding swords who were either completely sidelined in this, or the swords, like Cyclops had a lightsaber in like original promo art.
Yes,
so like
right.
Things dramatically changed over the course of the planning and execution of this one. And I think that's where you're finding things like the whole tarot part, which was a really cool idea and added a whole mystery to things. I agree. Like, this was the perfect storyline to have that play a very central role, and they kind of flubbed that.
Yeah. Eric, what's one more that you didn't like, I guess? I will go ahead. I'm going to change from one of my 3, although I'll mention this briefly. We saw all of those various Arakko versus X-Men matchups, and the one they did not show us at all is a fashion walk-off between Wolverine and Storm. As a homosexual, I call shade, and I'm going to need to request that we have an entire miniseries in which we see Storm and Wolverine in a pose-off on the runway. I want Wolverine modeling Andrew Christians. Thank you very much. But just putting that out there. The other thing I will mention is Betsy was obviously a huge point of the build-up to the story. Betsy is a central figure in the story. Betsy's fight is basically DQ'd in one swipe, and I don't understand at the end of it what is going on. And I know obviously Excalibur will explore what's going on with Betsy. If the point was bringing back the Captain Britain Corps in the model of Betsy Braddock as opposed to Brian Braddock, okay, I get this, but I'm not understanding what we're trying to say. And maybe it will reveal itself over time, but it's just, as a Betsy stan from way back in the 80s, I'm confused about Betsy's characterization, and I don't feel like she's being treated fairly as a character. Again, she's being treated like a punk, and I don't think Betsy's a punk. Yeah, it's weird because of the whole Excalibur run, it feels like everyone's been really, really, really coming down on her.
Yeah.
And I get it, like, to a certain extent, right? Because she's breaking norms and all this other shit, but like, I don't know. I just want Betsy to do well.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, and she cannot catch a break. I mean, I understand why Saturnine hates her guts. I get that, and frankly, I kind of love it. It's giving me Dynasty energy. Fully here for that. But I don't understand. Like, first of all, I thought her becoming Captain Britain was really rushed. That should have been its own miniseries so that she can, like, we can understand what she can do. She's on Krakoa, but she's Captain Britain. Why her? Like, there was a lot of rushing into that. And now it's making this moment where she is the prototype for the entire multiversal Captain Britain Corps feel cheap and easy. And I'm just waiting for it to be reset with Brian. That to me is where this is all going. So
interesting.
Yeah, I'm just putting that out there.
Interesting.
I guess I also wish, like, if it were Dynasty, I wish Betsy were. Is she like Crystal? I'm guessing.
Yeah.
But like at least Crystal. Sorry, we're going into like 80s soap opera references.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. That's all I wanted to know. 80s soap opera references. Okay.
Yes, but like I guess I wanted, to your point, Eric, I wanted Betsy is not a character that I like or dislike. She's kind of neutral for me. Like, I've read great stories with her. I've read stories where I'm like, okay, cool. But like I wanted her to, I don't know, have more personality.
A spine?
Yeah, something.
Yeah.
At least Crystal in Dynasty has a spine. She's like, God, like I didn't get that from her as much as I wanted.
What were you going to say, Mike?
I think that she does have a bit more spine than you guys are giving her credit for. I think that she's just against overwhelming odds. Like, the stories have been set up against her, stacked up against her in such a way that there is no win scenario for her. There is no way for her to succeed. And that maybe was part of everything. Like, no matter what she did, she was always like never fully prepared, never ready to do everything. Everyone expected X and she wanted to do Y. Like, everything that she's been written for over the last, I think, year or so has been just not something that it's just been a scenario where she can't come out on top, is to get us to this point where she has been completely broken. And I think maybe the story is going to turn into, well, maybe we should have appreciated Betsy Braddock a little bit more.
I hope so.
Because she represents all this other stuff. That's my take on it.
I hope that's true, because right now this situation is everybody saying, well, you're not Brian, so you suck. And
right.
I need the outcome of that to be, you're not Brian, you're actually better than Brian. That's what I need this story to become. And right now, maybe we're only, a part of the way through it. I need there to be a better outcome for Betsy for this, as a longtime fan of the character.
Yeah. Well, let's try to lighten things up. Let's talk about another thing that we all liked. Eric, let's just go right back into you. What was something that you enjoyed about this series? One more thing. Yeah,
sure. So one of the things that I liked and also didn't like was it was not at all what I expected it to be. It was we all went into this thinking it's going to be 10 fights with swords and good guys versus bad guys, and this was a romp. This was like every fight was so out of nowhere and something completely different. And at first I was like, well, I kind of wished it was just, the people fighting each other, all this buildup. But then I was like, but this is so much more interesting. And it's clever. And it's very much in the spirit of the Fey world and magic, and things are not what you think they are. And everything has a cost. And so I like that it subverted my expectations. I ended up overall, for all the complaints I've been leveraging against it, overall, I ended up really satisfied by this storyline. And I thought that it did a great job capping off the apocalypse chapter of this, and really does set up what I think is a very exciting new chapter for this House of X universe, with the Araco folks, with the return of the actual X-Men, even though to me it's a little nebulous right now what all that means.
Right.
But for me, it was not what I was expected, and I'm so glad it wasn't, because it really is another reset. And I give props to Hickman and the editors for saying, we're not going to dwell on this period for too long. We're going to move right on to the next one. We have a larger overarching story to tell, and we don't want people to get bored. So I praise them for that.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I think I won't get into it because it's one of my dislikes. So, Kevin, what's one of the things that you liked about this as well on top of that?
I don't want to steal your thunder because I want you to talk about Hellions. So, because that's obviously one of my favorite things too. So
no, go ahead, because I got to back up.
Okay. So the first issue of Hellions that we get in X of Swords is like, we're gonna send this team in, and they're gonna subvert the challenge. Cool. Great idea for this like Suicide Squad team of X-Men. Love it.
Yeah.
Issue 2. Mr. Sinister kills his whole team in the pursuit of a cape and just shows how petty and bitchy and cunty and evil he is. And then he gets back and he's like, oh, they're dead. And it's just, I don't know. It's why I love Hellions as well. I think it's a top tier book. I think
great.
It really it added and broke up the story in a way that I needed. I think it kind of, which I do have a con to that in some ways too, but it just I liked his involvement in this story. I do think we are building towards big stuff with Sinister.
Yep.
And I'm excited about that. But I also really love that team and the way that Psylocke and Wild Child have developed a really good, interesting relationship. Has been really fun. And I like what they're doing with Havoc and his like psychological like breakdown, basically.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's so good. I mean, every one of these little pieces of these team members built into why am I blanking on their name?
Nanny and the Orphan Maker?
No, the one who was mentally manipulated.
Empath and Greycrow.
Empath and Greycrow, thank you.
Yeah.
I just chuckled a lot. Yeah. It was so fun, and like it really added to the playfulness of everything. And Sinister's, he's a great character, and this was a really good use of him in this overarching story, and it really worked. It worked very well.
Yeah, I agree. Hellions is one of those surprise hits, and like that was such a fantastic little B story to the X of Swords. Like it wasn't tied in or anything. It had nothing to do with the actual fights that were going on, and it was like a very wonderful break, like you guys said. Like I love that those two issues. Like I especially love just the second Hellions issue that we got. Like I love the way that Zeb Wells is writing this book overall. This is like easily the surprise breakout hit of the entire Dawn of X line, as far as I'm concerned. Like what a surprise to see this book of weirdos become the best book that Marvel is publishing in the X line, period.
Yeah, it's terrific. And I think that we're moving into the Sinister and the Black King area of Dawn of X now with what's going on in Marauders. It's really good character work that we're seeing, like more than these villains have gotten, I think, ever.
Yep.
Yeah, it's going to be, and we'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the episode. Let's keep going. I want to talk about one more thing that I liked, which is the you die, you win challenge between Wolverine and Summoner. That fight that happened where the person who died actually got the point. I thought that was such a great fuck you from Lady Saturnine, just to manipulate everything into saying, yeah, we're going to take your unkillable character and fight them against someone else, or pit them against someone else. And if they lose, they win. Like what? If they lose the fight, they win. Like what a beautiful just middle finger. I just love that moment. That's all I really have to say about it. It's just a wonderful little moment for me.
And it's very good characterization for Saturnine. I kind of referenced this earlier. We have never had a villain like Saturnine before, where she's incredibly powerful, but what makes her super dangerous is that you have no idea what her intentions are, and she can go super literal or she can be very all over the place. I think like she's very exciting to me as a villain now. I can't wait to see if she's deployed.
I agree.
Yeah, I think that we're definitely going to see more of her in the Excalibur book moving forward, and it's going to be very exciting to see what Tini Howard does with that character moving forward. Yeah, all right, let's just quickly, let's go through one more dislike that everybody had. I'm going to start. I did kind of expect over-the-top arcade-style fights, and we got a lot of twists and turns and like a lot of dodges to make sure that no one died. And I guess this is like Faye bullshit, like combat by all these different things. Like there was an arm wrestling match between Magic and Pog, which I was going to be one of my likes. I like that character just because how stupid it was. But regardless, like I was a little bit disappointed that we weren't just getting straight up fights. Like I don't know if you guys read the AVX Versus series that came out.
Yep.
It was so dumb, but it was just characters fighting each other. I genuinely thought that's what we were going to get for like 3 issues of X of Swords. So I was kind of disappointed that we didn't get that. We did get some fights, and the fights were really good. And some of the twists and turns were really interesting, like I said. But ultimately, I was expecting more just like straight up, let's just mash the action figures together and see who comes out on top fighting. And instead we got a bunch of other stuff. So I was a little disappointed there.
Yeah. I hear that completely. I think that's fair.
Yeah. Kevin, what about you? What's one last thing that you'd have as a dislike for X of Swords?
Did it maybe go too quick for you all? Like, I know that's a weird thing to complain about with an event.
Really interesting, yeah.
But like every week, like it was months long because it's 22 issue. Like, but I have to wonder, like, it was like binging a TV show, you know, and watching it week by week. So, you know, I will say this, I will buy the hardcover of this and I will reread it. So there's that component to it, which is in a way a win for it. But I don't know. I guess I meant this more as like I think it did for me. Like, I think it went too quick, but again, it was 22 issues. So I think it had to. So I'm
Danny,
torn.
Danny in the chat's calling us out saying there's 24 if you include the prologue.
That's right.
True.
So
right. That's right.
I think,
but yeah,
I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead.
I was going to say, it felt quick, but also I think if it would have dragged out for another 2 weeks, I would have been mad. That's really weird. It's because I agree that it felt fast, but it also would have been annoying if we had more of it.
I also think that in 2020, time lost all meaning, and things were either took forever or were super fast. And for me, if this was coming out in a regular year, I think we wouldn't be having. I think we would have actually been critiquing it for going on too long. If it was any other year than 2020.
Right. Yep. I think you're right.
Agreed. Eric, what about you? One last thing you didn't like?
Gosh, I don't have anything else. We covered all of my dislikes.
Okay.
I think by and large, it was successful.
I agree.
Even though it was not what I expected it to be at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we covered everything that I had as well. Well, I guess, did you guys have any final likes? Any last things you want to mention that you really enjoyed? And then we can kind of get to some really quick like predictions about where we see the X-Men line going. I'll just start really quick. I love Doug Ramsey as a character now. Yep. Doug Ramsey, it's aka Cypher marrying Bay the Blood Moon. I mean, this was really fun. I thought, like, I was complaining about there not being arcade style fights, but then we get this marriage. I don't know why, but that way that Doug was portrayed, he's so enamored by someone he couldn't understand. I just thought that was really nice. Like him being head over heels by this towering person that he is now married to, and he doesn't really know what to do with the relationship, and kind of being this little tiny uncertain character. And when Doug Ramsey, to me, since the beginning of Dawn of X, has been like of this very confident, like, I'm in control, I'm the only person that can communicate with the island, being in this position of power where he's kind of just been like, can you guys stop talking shit about the island? They're right here. You know, like I really liked his character, how he's been built up. And then to see him kind of be put in a different position where he's so uncertain of himself, not being able to fight, not sure what to do, thinking he's going to die, but in like a really charming way, was really, really nice. And I love the way that he's being written now. Something about Doug Ramsey is just great. I think that could probably be said if I read a bunch of Doug Ramsey comics in the past, but, Cypher is just, I love that he's written now, the way he's written, and I just want nice things for Doug Ramsey. That's all that I want.
Yeah, if you go back and read the New Mutants from the 80s, Doug is a super likable character. That like he's just really charming. When they bring him back from the dead during Necrotia, he's almost a sociopath. And by almost, I mean he's actually fully sociopathic.
Right. I was going to say that's been like my really only touch on that character was, I think, Necrotia.
Yeah. But I will say that it was such a flip for me because and if you listen to our previous X-Men episode of this podcast, my whole thing was they've given us too many little seeds that Doug/Warlock are actually a massive threat to everything with Krakoa, if not the planet Earth, all along House and Powers of X, that to have Doug now be this like silly head over heels like teen kid, it's great. Don't get me wrong. It's super fun to read, but I'm like, are we not going down that path where Doug is actually a gigantic threat? Maybe we're not. I don't know. Like it's trying to read the tea leaves with this is kind of pointless. I'm just enjoying it for what it is now.
Yeah. Yeah. Kevin, what about you? What's one more thing you enjoyed?
I will say I liked the weirdness of the not sword fight. Okay. I liked that a lot. I thought it was unexpected and I thought it was fun. So I liked that. And I also, but I also to counter that and to say that I like the splash page where you get to see everyone showing up, all the different X-Men to fight and to join in the battle. That's such a beautiful image, and I saw a lot of people sharing that on Twitter because it's a really really cool image, and I really loved that. And I will finally just echo, I loved this Apocalypse story. I thought it was great.
Yeah. Eric, what about you? Any last final things that you liked about X of Swords?
I thought that first issue, the opening to it, where they all go into a Rocco and Rockslide is killed, and it was focusing on characters that don't normally get a focus.
Yep.
I thought that issue was thrilling. I thought it was really well executed from top to bottom, and I loved it. I will also previously on this podcast I talked shit about Rockslide and Armor, and I feel bad about it now. It's my fault. It's my fault. I got Santos killed. But I think that also, that was a great opening. I can't think of a stronger opening to a crossover in quite some time. So kudos to the staff for doing that.
Definitely. Well, thank you guys for going through this. We are kind of running a little long here, so I guess if you could give us one small prediction or where you think the X-Men is going, what's the one thing you think is going to happen next, or what's the one thing you're hoping is going to happen next? Let's start with you, Kevin.
Oh, so sorry, folks, this is a spoiler for X-Men 9, or not 9, the X book that just X-Men.
I think it's 16.
X-Men 16 that just came out this week. I'm really excited that they're voting for an X team. I think that's really exciting. So I'd be very curious to see where that goes and where that takes them. I have my team that I created. I was messaging Eric about this as soon as that, and we were talking about who is this team. So I'm excited about that. I think the other thing is, I guess, really my advice is for folks to read Hellions, because I think we're going to get some sinister stuff that pops up that's very crucial and important to like the genetics piece of everything that, makes up mutation. And then I guess maybe one last quick thing. Are we going to get a Moira show up or pop up or single issue like story? She hasn't shown up in long time. We know why, but are we gonna see her? I'm very curious. I don't think so. I don't think in the next year we'll see her, maybe even until November.
I don't think Moira shows up till the end game. That's the way Hickman works. She's off. She will drop like the sword of Damocles.
Yeah, and with that, Eric, what's your prediction for the future?
I'm really excited.
Or hopes and dreams.
Sure. I will quickly, Kevin's thing about the election, I can only get so aroused, but my God, I loved that twist. And if I am Marvel, I am finding a way to have my readers have a say in this.
Yep.
That is the win.
Oh, yeah.
They've done this in the past with, I believe, Avengers and Legion of Superheroes, where the readers would vote on the leader of a team. But if I'm Marvel, I'm like, you take one roster and the readers vote.
Yep.
And watch, it's someone stupid like Dupe or Gwenpool, but they become amazing.
Right.
That's of course. But so that I love that. But the thing that I'm really excited about is the new island of Araco being there and filled with essentially these Omega mutants that are the opposite of the Quiet Council. There is a ton of potential there, and one of my main concerns and criticisms of House of X has been the lack of real named antagonists. It's a lot of new nameless body horror of the week plant human hybrids or biotech hybrids, and there's no one to really glom onto. We have now real named antagonists that we can grow as characters, and I'm very eager to get into that because I think there's incredible opportunity there.
Eric, don't forget the plant Golden Girls.
Right, the plant version of the Golden Girls. Thank you.
That's definitely going to come back. The thing that I love about this second, not Quiet Council, I don't remember what they're actually called, is that there is a potential for a big like chess match to happen between the Quiet Council and the Araco Council, that I could see being a really interesting overarching thing where we get like a mini series of like we read a bunch of comics over a year and a half or two, and then we get a mini series where they're like orchestrating it, similar to like the Initiative, the Illuminati that Bendis did way back in the day. I think that would be really cool.
Yep.
That's very exciting. The Araco stuff is very, very exciting.
Yeah.
My hopes and dreams and predictions is that there's going to be something with Jamie Braddock that is going to break all of the Excalibur stuff that's happening, like putting him in this position of power despite all of the time after time after time of him being this kind of malicious, sadistic character, but for fun, is going to backfire, right? And not Brian or Betsy are going to be able to stop it. And I think that we're going to see something like Lady Saturnine having to team up with the X-Men to get back at Jamie, because he has reality manipulation like powers, and I don't know how that stacks up against Saturnine. And I'm really curious to see how that's going, like the other shoe's going to drop with that character being put in that position of power. So I'm very excited to see how that all plays out, and I think that's going to be a big plot point, as well as the Mr. Sinister stuff, which is only going to be exciting.
Agree. And I also don't discount what's going on with Sebastian Shaw either. I think that is also the other shoe that's going to drop.
That is the longest game, and I'm so excited to see how it plays out. Well, thank you guys so much for being on this episode. I know everybody out there, this went really, really long, but I hope you enjoyed it. Kevin, where can people find you on the internet?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at @ETKevinsMind. That's the best place to connect with me. I tweet about comics and movies and TV and Drag Race. So, yay, follow me there.
Okay. Eric, what about you?
The best place to follow me is at greatpopculturedebate.com. That's our website. You can also find us on Instagram, on Twitter, on YouTube. Make sure you follow us because we are working very diligently on season 3. The polls are up for our main episodes. For you comic readers, you may be interested in our Best Avengers team member poll, which is currently up on the website. We ask for your votes, and then the top 32 vote getters are debated by our panelists, which I believe include Mike and Kevin.
That's definitely going to be me. I'm pretty sure I'm on that episode at least.
I'm almost positive you are.
Well, yeah, again, thank you guys for being on the episode. Make sure you listen to Great Pop Culture Debate. I am not only like a fan of the show, but also produce it, so please go do that. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter at Mike Rappin, and you can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at IRCB Podcast. This show and our many subscriber-only episodes are powered by fans like you on Patreon, so join now at patreon.com/IRCB Podcast. Make sure you go vote in that IRCB Movie Club poll. It's going to be a big one. I do want to correct myself earlier. Spider-Man 2002, Batman the movie 1966, and Superman 1978 are the 3 movies that we are voting on right now. I will say Spider-Man is in the lead, so if you want us to hear us talk about Batman, you better get on that. If you haven't already, please make sure you rate and review the show. Share it online. Tag us. We get entered to win a $20 gift card to Midtown Comics or Comixology. And make sure to give us 5 stars because I think we deserve it at this point. Join us on Discord at ircbpodcast.com/Discord so you can listen to episodes live, hang out with us, do our book club every other week. We've got a bunch of stuff going on there. Read our manga challenge, all that stuff we have. And don't forget to tell a friend or two about the show. Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do all of our music. We can't thank them enough. Xander is a great friend, a great GM, and he edits the show. He's also just a fun person to talk to. I want to say thank you to Eric and Kevin for being on this episode. I want to say thank you to everyone on Discord who's listening, and everyone out there who listens to the show and shares it and tells their friends about it. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.